Hello everybody, Disciple here with Overwatch Curios. The closed beta of Overwatch was a very different experience for those lucky few who were able to participate, with a lot of gameplay mechanics that were either just not there from the beginning, or that were tweaked and reworked for the game's release. There were even a few heroes that weren't added until much later, making the team compositions and the game itself feel and play very differently. The whole point of the beta was to play, test, and then change these mechanics to get a viable release client and cater to as many players with as many polished features as possible. Let's take a look at what the beta was like back before release and how much things have changed since then. If you like this video, please leave a thumbs up, and if not, that's alright too. The beta first launched on October 27th, 2015, over 15 months ago as of the making of this video.
Are you with me?
The game had 18 heroes, 3 game modes, and 7 maps. One of the biggest changes made in the beta was introducing 3 new characters announced at BlizzCon in 2015, Genji, Mei, and D.Va. If you hate any or all of these heroes, you could take some comfort in knowing there was a version of Overwatch without them. These heroes went on to be very influential in Overwatch, with Genji carrying the Symmetra Zenyatta stacking comps, and D.Va fitting really well into the current tank meta. The gameplay itself had a completely different team comp balance, which made things generally interesting back then. In terms of different gameplay, we were also missing an entire map mode until much later in the beta. Control maps weren't in the earlier versions of beta, and we only had Assault, Escort, and Hybrid maps, and this new addition also led to much different team comps and strategies dominating the game. The meta was mostly centered on 2-2-2 compositions with double tanks, double DPS, and double supports, which is quite different from today's meta. The meta was more commonly focused on roles rather than specific heroes, but Lucio and Reinhardt were almost always picked in competitive play, and Mercy and Pharah were also very crucial parts of most team comps as well. During the testing in beta, a couple of heroes got some pretty significant reworks to bring balance to the roster for less rage-inducing games. Bastion was always the most frustrating to deal with for beta testers and was the most whined about by new players. In the beginning, he was a completely different machine, having a bit more defenses in his kit but sacrificing a bit of movement as well. He had a 1000 health front-facing shield that would be deployed anytime he was in sentry mode. The shield would rotate with him, but his movement was limited to 180 degrees, so setting up away from a wall or corner would leave you completely helpless to flankers. He didn't have as much armor and damage as he does now, but with the shield and turtling ability, he was actually quite a bit more dangerous since players just didn't know how to deal with him or his shield. Blizzard ended up changing him because new players found him extremely difficult to deal with, and more seasoned players could easily handle a sentry Bastion. They tried to find a balance to where he wouldn't absolutely pub stomp, but where he could still be powerful at higher levels. Torbjorn also got a major rework, and during the beta his kit was very different. In the beginning, Torbjorn could build up his turret from level 1 to level 3 without his ultimate. This produced a permanent level 3 sentry that fired guns and rockets, which was arguably even more annoying than a turtle at Bastion. However, the turret cost scrap to upgrade, as did the armor packs, and the scrap had to be manually collected from fallen enemies. When he would Molten Core, his turret and himself got significantly stronger, and armor packs didn't cost any scrap at all but gained a short cooldown. So what you had was a playstyle where Torbjorn would babysit his turret trying to build it up while going out and collecting scrap only after the enemy players had died, and maybe venturing out when his ultimate was up. Just like the Bastion scenario we mentioned before, it was really difficult for newer players to take down a level 3 turtle Torbjorn. However, when it was taken out, it was really difficult for the Torbjorn player to rebuild and be useful again. Unlike Bastion, who was at full damage potential right out of the gate, the Torbjorn player had to collect scrap and rebuild his turret from the ground up. This caused most players to actually set up camp at an alternate location away from the initial fighting to get that nest set up in time for the big push, leaving their team to fight without them for a good while. The rework Blizzard implemented was used to bring Torbjorn out from behind his turret and make him a much faster paced and more useful hero, most of the time. The beta also had a couple of small but hugely impactful mechanic changes that we kinda take for granted today. Quick melee, for example, used to be a full 50 points of damage versus the 30 we have today, but it used to be on a 1.5 second cooldown instead of 1 second like it is now. When quick melee did more damage, players were using it in their damage rotations all the time. the moment you'd run out of ammo or see a player's health drop to 25%, a melee to the face usually finished the job. For most heroes, 200 health is their maximum, so instantly doing a quarter of that was a bit overpowered, especially for a highly mobile character like Tracer who can easily use it to finish someone off. It was more of a kit ability than a finishing move at that point and was used way too often in place of other abilities in an actual hero's kit. Lowering the damage and cooldown allowed Blizzard to keep the melee in for very low health targets without overriding other kit abilities and strategies, and it also sets apart melee heroes like Torbjorn or Reinhardt so that they can be a little bit stronger. Some players today note that they feel like the ultimate charge in the game is a little bit too fast, making the game too ultimate-centric. However, back in the beta, the charge rate was even faster. Back then, you wouldn't only gain ultimate charge for doing damage to a player, but for taking damage as well. This put a really different feel on the pre-ultimate early game. You'd find entire teams sitting around charging their ults super fast if particular heroes were on the enemy team, as well as on particular maps. The overall ultimate charge times were lower as well, regardless of how they were charged. Smart players, especially healers, could use their ults during a push and, if successful, have their ults again in the same fight or at least charged again for the next push immediately after. It was borderline broken at the time, particularly Reaper and Mercy, whose ults were constantly used to save or end games. They removed the ability to charge ults by taking damage, added the passive ult charging that we see today, and rebalanced ult charge timers across the map. Some other design and mechanic changes were implemented during the beta that really impacted the game in a decent way. The scoring system used to be quite a bit different in a few ways that probably negatively affected gameplay back then. In the original scoring system, there used to be no medal for healing, and instead they had a medal for final blows. This made the system feel really unsatisfying for supports like Mercy and Lucio, and it enabled you to kill steal from your team by taking a final blow from a teammate for the medal. Additionally, your damage dealt to shields wasn't even counted on your scoreboard at all, and assists were counted as eliminations. So Zenyatta would get credit for any kill by an ally with Orb of Harmony and any kill on an enemy with Orb of Discord, even if he didn't damage them at all himself. This was changed back when the beta came back on February 9th, my birthday, after over a month of being down. The kill feed that we've come to love now wasn't there either. Now, there wasn't really a reason not to have a kill feed, it just wasn't something that was implemented. But it really was a big issue with the majority of players simply because we couldn't tell who was alive and dead at a glance. You'd have to hit tab and see at any given time, which was disruptive and annoying. It's pretty difficult to know who was killed if you weren't right there in the thick of it, and that knowledge could be used to time pushes and ultimates as well as create quick strategies based on who was alive on your team and the enemy team. For example, knowing whether or not the enemy Mercy is dead is crucial in knowing if your push with your ultimates is going to be successful or not. It was added into the game a while later at the constant request of just about everyone in the community, and now it's pretty hard to live without. Balancing heals in a game like Overwatch is just about as big a challenge as balancing all those damage numbers. You have to figure out what works as far as how healing is done, how much healing is done, and on what healing can be provided. As of now, healing is a cumulative increase to whatever all of your total combined life points are, and that includes shields and armor. If you have 500 health, you take damage to those shields and armor first and then to your health, and you can regenerate all of that regardless of what type of health it is. Back in the beta, however, healing an ally did not provide healing for shields. So when you have inherent shields on heroes like Zenyatta, Symmetra, and Zarya, those shields had to regenerate on their own over time, and healing or health packs would not regenerate those instantly. It would only heal you up to your health, and then you have to wait for the regeneration. This was huge for heroes like those mentioned that relied on shields to stay alive. At the time, Zenyatta only had 150 total health, and 100 of that was shields. If his shields were depleted, you were left with 50 health to go on for a few seconds until your shields regenerated, which is incredibly little. Remember that back then that was the damage of one quick melee or just a few stray shots. Just the simple change to allow shields to be healed alongside health and armor instantly made those heroes who relied on shields a lot stronger. The play of the game system was pretty different in beta as well. Mostly focused on kill streaks in a small amount of time, the system was heavily one-sided towards offensive heroes and those that had AoE insta-kill ultimates like Reaper or Pharah. It was so much leaning towards the ultimates that terms like Q of the game spawned throughout the beta community, This left all sorts of players and plays pretty much high and dry unless they could get several kills in a row in a short amount of time. You rarely saw healers and support heroes navigating the play of the game because, besides having a massive mercy res, there really wasn't anything destructive about their plays, even though a lot of the time it was the supports that put the most effort into the play. Non-damaging ultimates that saved the game were also excluded from the clips most of all. Zarya, Zenyatta, and Lucio come to mind, while their ultimates definitely played a huge role in wrapping up the win, because they didn't deal a lot of damage like a Death Blossom does. They didn't get any recognition. This made a lot of players really unhappy with the system and forced a change from Blizzard to include things like Lifesaver, where if you save the life of a hero that goes on to do awesome things, you get credit for it. Supports were also included much more as healing was measured a lot better alongside damage, and performance on or around objectives was also tallied in. Beta was a completely different beast altogether, and those who were included both in the beta and within the community talking about the mechanics and gameplay were instrumental in shaping the game for its release. Aside from gameplay and mechanics differences, it was a smaller and more close-knit community where a ton of fun moments and interesting things happened while the game was still growing. It was very interesting to see the same people in game after game, and love them or hate them, they were your teammates and opponents again and again. The other dramatic difference from the beta was the rank system, but that was so terrible, I don't really want to talk about it. So, how do you guys feel about what the beta used to be compared to what the game is now? Have any awesome or interesting beta moments to share? Drop them down in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you later. Peace.